Good Morning Maryland at 9.
Thanks for joining us this morning. Historians will tell you that we are still living with the consequences of World War II, the most massive conflict in history, without a doubt. And it's a conflict that reached a fevering pitch on May 10th, 1940. The Germans unleashed their Blitzkrieg against the Netherlands and Belgium. Well, Dr. John Vanderberg, he lived through this. He lives in Woodstock, Maryland now. He's a dentist. He joins us this morning with an incredible story that's sad and hopeful and scary. Thank you so much for coming in, Doctor.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you for having me.
So tell us first, I guess, about your experience with the war, what you remember.
My memory goes back as far as the first day of the war. I don't remember before that. I was 4 years old. And I remember looking out the window from our third-floor apartment and seeing our neighbors in pajamas, gesturing and all. And we thought that was strange because we never seen our neighbors in pajamas on the street in the morning. And they were gesturing, and then my father turned on the radio, and we found out we were invaded by the Nazis overnight. And that was my first experience with it. There were no soldiers yet around because the Marines had stopped the Nazis at the Maas River Bridge very bravely. And that lasted about 4 days, and then the bombardment started because the Nazis didn't put up with that.
You were so young. I mean, were you able to comprehend how scary this was?
Oh, yes. We were frightened. I knew that my parents were apprehensive, and my mother especially, but she put a good face on it, and she tried to encourage us, you know.
And your father was a real hero. Tell us about him.
Yes, he worked for the employment service in Rotterdam, and he worked with the underground. And my father knew some German. So he became the interpreter for the Nazi physician at the office there. And Dutch men from Rotterdam between 17 and 42 had to appear before the Nazi physician to see if they were qualified physically to go to Germany to work in war factories. And so my father became the interpreter, and whatever diseases people had, he would interpret that. And then at the end of the day, the Nazi officer would sign all these forms from each applicant. And he'd turn the lower right-hand corner and make signatures, you know.
Wow.
And every once in a while, my father would put a blank form in there. And he would fill that out for the underground, for friends, for relatives, anybody he knew, to keep the men from having to go to Germany. So the head of the household needs to stay home and not being taken off to Germany. So he helped a lot of people. I didn't know about this, of course, during the war. This was top secret and very dangerous. But after the war, I'd be downtown with my father at a soccer game or shopping or something. And then people would come up to my father and say, Mr. Vandenberg, thank you so much for what you did for my husband or my uncle or so. And so I finally asked my father, what are they thanking you for? You know, and he finally told us. And this was very dangerous because sometimes at 2:30 in the morning, there'd be a knock on the door from Nazi soldiers. They would investigate our apartment to see if we were hiding any Jewish people. But when the knock came, my father never knew whether it was come to get him.
Right.
You know, it was very dangerous.
It's amazing, too, that I think when people hear this story, not only that you survived it, but you were saying you came to the United States in 1958, $3 in your pocket. You're a dentist today. And I know that people can read how this happened with your book. It's From Tyranny to Freedom. But how does it happen? How did you become a dentist? How did you come over here?
Well,
we don't have enough time. We could do a whole show on you.
It's one step at a time. But this friend who I met on the ship eventually helped me in Baltimore. When I arrived in Baltimore from New York, I had $3 in my pocket, and he helped me rent an apartment, a room really, on Augusta Avenue in Evanston Village for $6 a week. And I had $3, so he lent me $3 so I could rent that room for the week. Yeah. And then I started working and all. And then after a week, he asked me, he said, John, now that you're in this country, what do you want to do? What do you want to be? And I really had no idea. I was just glad to be here, and I knew I'd find some work somewhere. So he said, well, if you don't know what you want to be, why don't we look through the yellow pages? So we looked through the yellow pages, and we got through accountants, bankers, bakers, and nothing appealed to me until we got to dentists. And I said, well, how about dentist? He said, do you want to be a dentist? And out of the clear blue, I said, yes. I'd never thought about being a dentist.
And here you are.
And so he said, all right. I said, I'll tell you what, I'll call the dental school tomorrow and make an arrangement with the Dean of Admission. So I did. The next week, I went to the Dean of Admission. His name was Dr. Vandenbosch. Very similar to my name, of course. And he was from Belgium originally, so we got along great. And he helped me. He made up a wash list, all the things I had to do. And I followed that wash list, basically, and eventually got to be a dentist.
Now, before we go, will you read us an excerpt from your book?
Sure. In the beginning, the Dutch Marines had successfully stopped the enemies at the Maas River Bridge, which is why the bombs started falling 4 days later. The Nazis bombed downtown Rotterdam, flattening many buildings, stores and inner-city residences. Some 78,000 were made homeless, over 30,000 were killed, 2,100 Dutch soldiers died, and 2,700 were wounded. Many children died while they were in school. And another excerpt I think you asked me to read is, and towards the end of the war, the food situation was catastrophic. People began eating tulip bulbs, sometimes family pets. With the extreme cold, there was no electricity, wood, or running water, and sewers didn't work either. People tried to dig up streetcar and railroad tracks to get wood. People began to die, particularly the very old and the very young. So it was pretty rough.
It was very rough.
My parents weighed about 70 and 80 pounds at the end of the war, and normally they weighed twice as much. But there came an end to it. And there were many rumors during the war that the Americans were close. And the rumors never panned out. But on May 5th, 1945, there were rumors again. It was a sunny morning, and at some moment, my brother Martin came running up the steps. He said, Pa, I've seen an American car. He said, well, how do you know it was an American car? He said it was a green car with a white star painted on the side instead of a swastika. So that was pretty convincing. So we all went downstairs. I stood at the end of the sidewalk, and it was there was excitement in the air. People were just running and hollering, you know, exciting. And all of a sudden, from my left, I hear this rumbling sound. And there came this big green truck, military truck, with soldiers in them. And these soldiers were waving and smiling. Now that was unusual. I had seen many soldiers. They were nasty, they were serious, they threatened. These soldiers were friendly and they smiled. I thought this was illegal for a soldier to smile, you know. And then tanks came and other trucks, and here the Americans brought us freedom. I'll never forget it. I went through like a positive culture shock.
Sure.
And I was shaking, partially from weakness, partially from the ground rumbling from the heavy equipment, and partly from excitement, of course. And it was so exciting. But the Americans brought us freedom. Freedom is so precious. Anyone watching, I would say to them, guard your freedom, because it is so precious. I ran for political office a couple of times, and I used to say, when Holland was in big trouble, America came and bailed us out. But if America ever were to be in big trouble, who would come and who could come to bail us out? Nobody. We need to protect our freedom in the most serious way.
Well, I think that there's so much that we can learn from this book, so thank you so much for coming in and telling us about it. You're such a survivor.
Yes.
It's an incredible story. The book is called From Tyranny to Freedom. Where can people buy it really quickly?
Barnes & Nobles, Amazon, Borders, all over the country.
All right. Well, thank you for coming in and sharing with us.
Thank you,
Good to see you,
Maggie.
Doctor.